Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 14th edition of Abu Dhabi Art. On behalf of the Department of Culture and Tourism, I'm very, very pleased to see you physically today after the past years, and especially to see you physically in Saadiyat Cultural District on Saadiyat Island, where next door the Louvre is celebrating its 5th anniversary. And I am sure when you passed this morning to arrive to Manarat Al Saadiyat, you saw the Zayed National Museum, the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, and the Natural History Museum being under construction. So here we are today in a place where Abu Dhabi Emirate continued its commitment to its cultural vision. And we're here still to be able to provide places of cultural offering and thought-provoking intellectual and artistic platforms. Just a few weeks ago, literally, 15 days, we have successfully concluded the 5th edition of the Cultural Summit, and we brought together cultural leaders from around the world to reflect on the transformative role that culture can play in our social, urban, and economic development. And most importantly, the critical role for the city's sustainable development goals. It's okay? Because I can't hear myself. Throughout the years, Abu Dhabi Art has become a very important platform. Through 14 editions, it's also the constant witness of significant development of the capital's cultural scene. It continues to evolve with its own identity, with its own artistic and cultural identity, to reflect and showcase the cultural dynamics of Abu Dhabi, of the UAE, but also of the region. Over the past 14 years, Abu Dhabi Art has been one of the key platforms of our department, the Department of Culture and Tourism. And it has significantly supported the development of Abu Dhabi creative industries. How did it do it? It's by being a catalyst for nurturing and attracting artists, cultural practitioners, and creatives that are intrinsically part of the fair, far-reach ecosystem. The way we try to do it is to have a curated program across galleries, across public engagement, but also across artistic commissions. Abu Dhabi Art aims to remain a place of discovery of contemporary cultural practices. As an art platform, it does invite and also support talent from the UAE, but also from the region. The reason is to continue to contribute to a strong creative economy. The UAE as a whole, as a nation, has been heavily investing in the cultural and creative sector, as the country's leadership has long recognized the importance of fostering robust cultural economy. This was reinforced recently by the launch of UAE's national strategy for the cultural and creative industries, which aims to further promote the growth of the sector. In Abu Dhabi, notably, the Department of Culture and Tourism, through its different entities, has developed strategic initiatives for both the public and the private sectors to promote the value of culture as public good, and has initiated cross-sectoral collaboration and cooperation to holistically address the essential needs of the sector in providing equal access and opportunities across the cultural value, the cultural value chain. Today, more than ever, DCT, the Department of Culture and Tourism, is working to cultivate cultural ecosystem and embrace culture as a lived experience, advancing it as public good and protecting and promoting the diversity of cultural expressions to achieve sustainable goals. Of course, today we're speaking about Abu Dhabi Art, and Abu Dhabi Art plays a significant and important role in our strategy. It does create a multidisciplinary platform that reflects global discourse and experimental ideas in actual and local space, emphasizing the tangible exchange on the diversity of these artistic expressions. The fair program, I'm sure you will see it in the next 5 days, extends beyond Abu Dhabi and Manarat Al Saadiyat to Al Ain, and even recently in different places in the world, 2 years ago in London City, last year in Venice. And the idea is that we emphasize the tangible exchange on the diversity of these artistic expressions. The fair program extends to create organic places of interaction that helps to build a creative space. This is how we build creative spaces, is by ensuring that the community is organically embedded within everything that we do. I wish you all the best for the next 5 years. And for the people who didn't come to Abu Dhabi for many years, please make sure you also visit, in addition to Louvre Abu Dhabi and the Saadiyat Cultural District, some of our important cultural sites, historic buildings that have been adapted to also create places for dialogue and exchange. I would also like to thank Abu Dhabi Art team, the entire team, Dyala and her team, but also artists, practitioners, curators who have joined us this year, as well as all the galleries, and of course, all of you. And we would like to ensure that you are not only people attending our events, but you are participating. You move from spectator to protagonist and being intrinsic part of what we do. Thank you so much for being with us, and I wish you all the best for the next 5 years. And now I leave you with the Abu Dhabi Art Director and the curators and artists who have been part of this edition to take you through the interesting highlights of Abu Dhabi Art this year. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, to Abu Dhabi Art 2022. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here today in what I hope is a real rejoining of the community. This is the second time we've come together as a fair during and after the pandemic, and there's really a moment of people rejoicing in being able to see art firsthand, although of course the metaverse has expanded in this time, but also of being together and of having those moments for dialogue that our executive director, Rita, has just touched on. I'd like to begin the conference by focusing on, of course, the heart of the fair being the galleries that come together, that make up its complete identity each year. And this year, we've expanded enormously from what is normally around 50 galleries as an art fair, so very small in terms of global fairs, to 80 galleries, which is an incredible jump. And this, in part, is due to the participation and contribution of 3 amazing curators, and all from different professional spheres in the world of art. Ricardo, of course, a journalist and also a seasoned fairgoer and contributor amongst fairs globally. Rashida, academic, a professor of philosophy in Tunisia. Jade, now celebrating 25 years as a gallery from Turkey and having seen incredible transformation. So I will ask for your attention as we lightly touch on some of the exciting themes that they've brought together in their curated section at the fair. And if I may, I would like to start with Rashida. I will invite you to talk a little bit about your section. Now, as I've mentioned, of course, you're an academic, a professor of philosophy, a curator. You've been living and working in Tunisia and really supporting artists from there for a long time. If we start with your research as a professor of philosophy at the University of Tunis, can you tell us what this research has been about, how it started, what it really concerns?
Yes, I came to art through philosophy. My doctorate and had already dealt with the relationship between art and politics in Renaissance, Italian Renaissance. Then my research at the university was focused on aesthetics, art history, and in particular, the question of writing art history and the periodization in the short history of art in Tunisia. Finally, my teaching focuses in general on the aesthetic experience, the phenomenon of creation and reception, and the question of criteria. I have published books of these problems, and I founded the Tunisian Association of Aesthetic, which brings together artists and intellectuals. Mm-hmm.
And of course, you've brought together, you know, as a supporter of the art community, you've worked with artists, galleries, museums. Can you share some of the challenges and opportunities for galleries operating in diverse art communities across North Africa?
Yes. I have been an advisor to foundations, museums, and I have curated several exhibitions. Today, there is a dynamic art scene in Tunisia and North Africa with the creation of new art centers and new galleries. The galleries, of course, encounter difficulties, and that is why they have to face several challenges. What difficulties? First, there is not a real organized art market, first one. There is no real financial support from the state, especially for young galleries. Three, most galleries don't have the means to support and assist artists. And four, one last very important point, the legislation of the countries not follow the rhythm of the evolution of art and of art market. And also the media coverage is insufficient. There are no magazines specialized in art. I only know one or two magazines, like Diptyque, we invited it. The challenge, of course, are great for the galleries. First of all, is to be able to maintain a regular rhythm of exhibition. It's to attract new public. There are new forms of art, such art, post-internet art, which may interest young collectors. It's also to adapt the prices of works in the absence of real market. And the challenge is also to be able to participate in an international fair like is here for greater visibility. Mm-hmm.
And of course, you've brought together a number of galleries here at the fair. And I thought perhaps you'd like to highlight, you know, one or two of the artists or the booths, and perhaps tell us through these artists, you know, how you'd describe the overall curatorial perspective of your section.
Yes. For this new tomorrow's focus for North Africa, I insisted on the evolution and emergence of new artistic practices with different mediums. My concern during this curatorial process was both to preserve the aesthetic dimension of the works and to show in its diversity the creative energy that animates the artists who are markers of the future in our region. Of course, all the artists selected in the focus deserves to be mentioned. So I chose three young artists whose works also allow us to think. One of them is Aisha Snoussi. So is an artist committed to individual freedom. The pyramidal installation, Sépulture au Noyer, EES, is a ritual site composed of 801 bottles with writings and organic elements immersed in water. It's a work that recreates the ancient symmetries of the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Tunisia, but also a ritual site dedicated to the drowned lovers, females in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Tunisia. The second work is to artist Sadek Rahim, which has a critical dimension in relation to the economic policy in his country, Algeria. Here, he treats the carpet as a plastic object to deconstruct both the myth of the flying carpet and the custom of wall decoration in the home. He inserts a pump engine, like you see, made in USSR to mark the political choice of development and expansion for decades in Algeria. And the third one, yes, this work by Miriam Benkiran, a young multidisciplinary Moroccan artist who is a painter, sculptor, and installer. Here, she proposes the elements of urban environment by several geometric forms in an intense chromaticism. Her works question both the seduction and the danger of our more and more robotic environment.
Thank you, Rashida. There's, of course, many more artists to discover in Rashida's curated section at the atrium, and she's available to give you a tour after the press conference and help you explore some of those other artists as well. Can I ask, are there any outcomes you would especially hope for the galleries and artists? You mentioned media coverage. There are a few publications. What would you hope comes out of this collaboration?
Yes. I especially hope that the gallery owners and the few artists who have made the trip will be of interest of the public and collectors. I also hope that they will take advantage of the fair, which is very international and very rich, to make contacts and get information. I also hope that they will have the opportunity to visit everything that is being done in the field of arts in Abu Dhabi.
They're all very welcome, and thank you for bringing them together for the fair. Thank you, Rashida. I'm now going to invite Jade, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for several years, and who, of course, as I mentioned earlier, celebrated 25 years as a gallerist in Turkey, to tell us a little bit more about her curated focus section at the fair. To begin with, I'd love to offer an overview, if you're able, please, Jade, on the changing art community and art scene in Turkey over the years, having borne witness to several decades now of its developments.
Thank you, Dyala. First of all, thank you for having me here, and it's an honor to be here with, I must highlight that, 3 female curators, a female director. It's really empowering to see how female art people are present and strong in Abu Dhabi, and I have seen this over a decade now, and I'm really happy to be part of it. Yes, I have been a gallerist for 25 years, and it has changed a lot in Turkey. It was a very, very small community, and it was very traditional, oil and canvas. Collectors were over 60, 65, only collecting a certain item. But then again, with the creation of Istanbul Modern and Istanbul opening up, especially in 2010, being the culture capital, things started moving very fast, maybe a little bit too fast for the time being. And then right now we have 3 or 4 generations of gallerists, and what we try to nurture is the artists' careers and promote them globally. We have a very new, younger generation, 2nd generation of collectors, and they live globally, they travel globally, and they have taken on the mission of supporting Turkish artists' productions globally. We have some very valuable foundations like Saha Foundation, who has been helping Turkish artists throughout global biennials. And with COVID, I must say, galleries have become much closer. We understood the value of creating platforms together, working as a team, exchanging information, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to curate this section.
And you mentioned that there is this sort of younger generation of collectors and galleries, and I think as people go around your section at the fair, which is in Hall A, that they will discover also some of the more established galleries and some of the younger ones. Are there any you'd like to highlight for a moment now? Of course.
For me, Gallery Nev is very important. They have just completed their 35th season being a gallerist. I was in university, and I was always finding myself at Gallery Nev. They are one of my inspirations to become a gallerist, and what I've seen is the approach towards their artists. The artists that I want to highlight now, Tayfun Erdoğmuş, they have been supporting his journey for over 2 decades. So always mentoring and supporting their artists and foreseeing the future with them has been their mission. And I think that's why they're highly respected and have been in the market for 35 very successful years. And then we have this is Öktem Aykut. This is a second generation gallerist, and their artist is Koray Arış. Can we go back to the other slide? I just wanted to say the previous one. Yes, with this, why I picked this work. There is no paint on this canvas. It's an artist that works slowly, and he works with decaying. So anything you see on this work, it's organic, it's natural, it's brought together within chemical reactions, and it takes a very long time, and he enjoys that. So I would just advise to just go and look into the details. You're going to discover a whole universe in it. And then Koray Arış, he's in his 80s. He's another pioneer of Turkish contemporary sculpture. And I've been now realizing that materiality in the works that I've picked is one of the highlights, because this is a wooden sculpture and it has leather in it, and the form comes from Anatolia. Talking about the region, we always come to carpets and kilims. Like Rashid, I also have a kilim initiating from Anatolian culture, because I think we value families a lot. We spend a lot in our homes, and carpets have always been part of the family life. And Gülay, one of my artists for more than 20 years, her signature material, industrial silver wire. Recent years, she started working with Anatolian women, trying to get them into craftsmanship and trying to get them involved with her work. And she travels all around Anatolia, and she picks one of the iconic symbols of the Anatolian carpets, and she highlights them, she heroes them. And what we see here is the back spine, almost a spine, and it represents family. So yes, and the name of the work is Melike, is dedicated to the collaborator from Anatolia. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight Yıldız Özgen from Sanatorium. This is a younger generation artist who experiments physically and mentally. The blue abstract work is his work, but also the installation is his installation. The name of the work is Rich Part of the Sky, and he takes the scientific values and images from NASA, and he paints exactly with those pigments. And if you go to the booth and look into those little bags, they are little color paint bags that he uses in his paintings, and that's the way he uses in his studio. There's a result, there's a painting, but there's a lot of process and installation and performance bits in his work. I would love to take you after this and explain it a little bit in more detail.
Thank you. Jade, you mentioned, perhaps with the work of Gülay, which is actually much more radical than it might initially appear when people sort of think about, tapestries and the region. There are certain, if you like, perceptions about the region. And often when people really look at and engage with the arts, they discover otherwise. So I don't want to rush towards stereotyping too much about, Turkey, but you've brought together a group of galleries from Turkey, and using it a little lazily as an umbrella term. But is there anything you feel connects those galleries that are participating at the fair?
Yeah, first of all, they are my colleagues for more than 20 years. But other than that, these are galleries. I specifically picked the galleries that nurture the artist's career, and they have a path towards the future. But other than that, they all have global vision. They're all open to creating platforms, and I believe Abu Dhabi Art also, one of the key missions is creating platforms for dialogue and participation. So these galleries, I think they fit into the region, and I'm hoping that collaborations, new platforms can be discovered throughout this edition of Abu Dhabi Art.
Wonderful, thank you. So again, please everyone come and find Jade afterwards in her section and learn more about some of the artists if you're not already familiar with them, or find old friends there. I'm going to now invite our third curator in the gallery sector, Ricarda, who of course has come at this from quite a different perspective, because we focused on regions and countries, and now I'm going to invite you to share with us your thoughts on what criteria you had for bringing your galleries together.
I have to say that I know well all the gallery I invited here. I know the good quality of the work they did and they are doing, and the term of search and exhibition. All the gallery I invited are here for the first time in Abu Dhabi Art and in the UAE. And they are all, they present all international artists, and for many of these artists is the first time that here in the UAE. So I joined the work of my colleague, I mean, in a very free way, if you want, very independently. But I mean, we work, in the same direction, in order to create a wide platform for artists, for culture, modern artists, for every culture. I start with, I know African art well. I work with another fair in South Africa, and given the growing interest in African art, because we discuss all with Dyala, so we find a good dialogue. I invited a group of African and international gallery, which represent African artists from different country in the continent, from North Africa to South Africa. As part of the Emerge section, you can see the Tunisian artist, in the booths of the Tunisian artist, gallerist Aisha Gorgi, the work of Najat Zarbout. Najat Zarbout is a young artist, and she works in the title, you can see the images. She works, his work is strongly conceptual, and I mean, is an informal work. It's not, anyway. Always in the section of emerging section, we have the South African gallery, THK, that show the abstract work of, again, the abstract work of conceptual work of the Abdus Salam, is always a young artist. Abdus Salam did a new body of work for the fair called Flower for the Forest. These artworks are crystal gemstone sculpture inspired by the natural change of the stone over the time. So Naja and Zarbout, they are possible to see in their booths there. Then also the Italian gallery Listene present a selection of artists from the Ivory Coast, Armand Bois, Abu Dhabi and Bruli Bouabré. These artists are representing the Ivory Coast at the ongoing Biennale, Venice Biennale, that the gallerist co-produced. Bruli Bouabré represent a unique chapter. I mean, I want to focus just a little word on the works of Bruli Bouabré. I mean, you can see there in the bottom. Represent a unique chapter into itself in the context of the modern and contemporary African art. He wanted to create a written alphabet for his people, which had not only spoken languages. So this alphabet is called the alphabet Bete. Also, again, the gallery Kavita Kallaram. Kavita Kallaram is the founder of Lago Galleries co-art space. She's introduced to Ada for the first time the work of the Nigerian modern sculptor Bruce Obrakpeya. Bruce Obrakpeya he was born in 1932, so he has a longer career, but I mean, is not well known enough. I mean, in international context, so it was important to have his work here. And then also she introduced with Dyala, we discussed about the possibility, and we decided to invite also the work of Ngozi Omeshedzema. She's a sculptor also, and I mean, you can see her work even in the space of in and around. We have seen. Also, the Italian gallerist Gianpaolo Bondio came with the work, the conceptual work of the Nigerian artist Olubuibe, and with Magdalena Campos Bon. Magdalena Campos Bon is a Cuban with African origin, and Magdalena Campos Bon will be part of the upcoming Sharjah Biennale. The Italian gallery Sirio Ortolani came with the three African artists, two from South Africa, Dan Olter. Can we go? Okay, Dan Olter on my right side, Catherine De Villiers and Kresha Muzaki from Zimbabwe, but based in South Africa. And then the Parte Gallery, a gallery from Milano, introduced to Ada a new group of modern European masters. One of these, Salvo, Natalia Damiano, and Valerio Dami. All these artists are never been exhibited here, as all the groups. So Salvo is the Salvo because Salvo has a particular story in the first 70s and late in the 80s. He traveled in different Arab countries and in Turkey where he made some sketches, and when he came back. From this sketching, he created a series of paintings. One of these series was dedicated to Manarat. So we have a series of really, no, it's not, yeah. Can you see the images in case? Yeah, exactly, it's that one. And that one is the very established artist, Valerio Dami. P2420 introduced the works of the the conceptual work of the German artist Irma Blank. She was born in 1934, Adele Leccioni and Rodrigo Hernandez. These are conceptual artists, and I mean, it's not easy to approach his work. And this was important for an art fair to change attitude, respect, I mean, something more open to the dialogue. So the engagement, I mean, is something that is important, even for our audience. Yeah. Marinella. I forget Marinella. I mean, when you came to the fair, you were welcome, but great. A great installation that, I mean, is from Marinella Senatore. And I mean, the title of this installation is Body in Aliens. But I think, I mean, even when I in this context, when I heard my colleague to talk with, I know, but even before, I know that we were really in aliens. I mean, the title of this work is Body in Aliens, but we work really in aliens with our mind, very independently, each of us in a different way, but really in a great alliance. So just to create an international fair, more and more international.
Thank you, Ricardo. And I think
can I just add I mean, a reflection? I remember a few years ago, one of our gallerists, the Gallery 38, I feel, yeah, 38 organized an exhibition. It was called Prête-moi ton rêve. In this exhibition, they worked to put together African artists from different countries. So going beyond every geographical barrage, cultural barrage. So, and my impression that in this art fair, we did, in a way, something like this. So we went beyond everything, every barrage. So, and that's, I mean, this is a great satisfaction for us to work in this way.
That's a beautiful way to end. You know, we certainly shared dreams, loaned each other our dreams, and carried it forward. And I hope everyone discovers that in the gallery sectors at the fair. I'm going to thank our gallery curators very much for their incredible contributions, and I encourage all our media here to discover them firsthand. And I think we're going to have to move on to our next sort of panel. And thank you for all your thoughts and for sharing that with us. Thank you. I'm now going to invite on stage our three commissioned emerging artists from the UAE, Majd Al-Louj, Sara Al-Mahari, and Mohammed Khalid, who've been working on commissioned works for the fair over the last several months, and which, you know, of course, you'll have to discover firsthand. Majd, I think I'm going to start with you, if I may. Of course, you're originally Syrian. You've been residing here in the UAE for a while. And, you know, with your sort of ancestral home undergoing such a turbulent time, it's been quite challenging to go back. Can you tell us, did that come into play quite significantly in your work? Was it one of your driving concerns?
Yeah, so it's working. Everyone can hear me. Great. So my work basically starts with exploring landscape and geopolitics. So I always like zoom out and look at a specific area, but I never thought of zooming in and taking a closer look on what exists on in a specific area. And for this one, as a start, I started tracing out my last trip to Syria. We would drive every summer to Syria from the UAE, and we would pass by all these countries and then enter from the southern border, the Syrian border. So I thought I would trace that journey and see the line that I took, the route. And then the work that I made is basically, I started extracting these like lines and the trips that I took, starting with the trip that I made, and then I extracted the border and specifically the southern border of Syria, and I created these sculptures. And and I was like more interested in looking at that like thin line that exists on a map and dismantling that line. I was also interested in the positive and negative space that happens like when you cross the border and before you cross the border. So I was interested in dissolving these lines through like different artistic expressions. So I used some aquatint printmaking techniques to dissolve the lines that are drawn on a copper plate, as you can see in the black copper plates. What happens to the line when you etch the plate for longer extended periods of time. And I was also interested in what happens when you draw and scan and then rescan the image. What happens to that line when you like scan the image multiple times? It starts like dismantling it and dissolving these lines.
And of course, visitors will encounter some sculptures when they walk into the space that pick up on that idea of the vulnerability of a line or the tension inherent in it. We don't seem to have any images of the installation, but perhaps you could just touch on those three sculptural works in particular.
So the sculptures are extracted from the southern border, and I took the border as a chunk, and then I split it into three sections that are like, they're basically aluminum lines that if you put together, you will see the Syrian southern border, and they're sitting on a plinth that is also extracted from the northern Syrian border. So if you put them all together, you see the Syrian map at the end. So that was the whole idea behind these sculptures. And it's like an interactive piece that is inspired by the wire buzz game that we used to play as kids. So like you have an aluminum rod and you have a handle that you need to pass without touching the edges of the sculpture. And once you touch it, the handle sort of like vibrates. And yeah, that's the idea behind it.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that so articulately. I'm going to now turn to you, Mohammed Khalid, and ask you to tell us about your journeys with a jellyfish.
Testing, yeah. So my practice is kind of situated in the present. I describe what I do is walking, running, cycling, and driving. But most of the time, it's like I encounter my work. That's how I always see it. And one of the days, I decided to go swimming, and this happened to be an encounter with a jellyfish. And with this encounter in the film, you'll see that I'm talking about getting stung. And it started making me question of like, how did the jellyfish get to this place? How does a jellyfish circulate through our Gulf? And I reside in Dubai, and Dubai has plenty of man-made islands. And because of these man-made islands, water circulation gets trapped, and what results is jellyfish infestations. And upon this infestation, I get stung. So now I'm starting to negotiate whether if I could do something. If man decided to make this island that got the jellyfish stuck, could I undo it somehow? And the paradox is that, in the film, we'll figure out whether if making the jellyfish unstuck actually benefits its life, or does it actually benefit mine? And what happens is we move it from the Arabian Gulf all the way to the Indian Ocean. So, yeah.
So it starts in Palm Jumeirah, really, which is a very built-up area. And then when it moves to the Indian Ocean, is that a kind of lost paradise, really, for the jellyfish that you're imagining that it returns to? I mean, how do you see that sort of relocation, if you will, or new movement?
I mean, for me, I'm kind of also studying like how water circulation starts. Water comes from the Indian Ocean into our Gulf. And essentially, the jellyfish's life also kind of starts in that end. So I'm kind of trying to put it back into its natural circulation. So hopefully, it'll take a longer time before it gets stuck again. But at least I would do my part, which is kind of stopping it from getting killed at some point.
And one last thought, you were researching, the life of a jellyfish, as it were, and came up with some quite sort of fascinating information about that. I don't know whether you want to mention how a jellyfish exists, or it doesn't think, does it? I mean, it doesn't have any.
I mean, yeah, because definitely there's this ethical question of me wondering if me moving this animal, if man made this island that kind of has its own natural effects that are either positive or negative. Now me doing this gesture, what does that mean to this creature? And weirdly, thankfully, the jellyfish does not have any bones, heart, or respiratory system. So this made my conscience a lot easier to kind of move it. And it's such a bizarre creature that the only thing it can sense is water and the changes within that water. So that kind of made it quite an interesting experience, of moving this creature somehow, and it will never actually feel anything.
Or a very different sentience to what we value as humans, and how we connect that feeling with thought. I mean, perhaps there is pure sentiment. Well, I think your video is incredibly beautiful and takes you on that journey far better than we can in these few minutes now. But thank you for sharing those initial sort of insights into your thought as you created the work. I'm now going to turn to our third commissioned artist, Sarah Al-Maheri, and here on screen some of the works that she's been working through really for this commission. I think, Sarah, this body of work almost started with a residency you did in Abu Dhabi. Could you maybe tell us about that starting point and what that was?
Yeah, for sure. So this work specifically, the research started during my C Fellowship, also known as Sheikh Salam Emerging Artist Fellowship, back in 2020 during the pandemic. So honestly, Abu Dhabi Art was the opportunity to fully see it through and take it further, and to extend this research and see how much I could possibly do, and the immensity and the production of the work as well. And
what we're looking at here are sort of different sort of iterations of a sort of cardboard packaging, really, that you've kind of played with. Could you tell us more about that? I mean, what sort of drew you to that material, and what are we actually discovering through your different sort of remakings of it?
Yeah, actually, a lot of my practice, I use reusable objects or material. I find a liking to that, and specifically within this work, there are 3 parts to the installation. The first one, the picture that you see on the left are monoprints of packaging, that's cardboard packaging, and also to the right is collages of cardboard packaging. And if we can also move it on to the next slide, the third part of the installation is also all of it is derived from discarded packaging, but this one specifically is styrofoam. So I was working with different materials, working through them as well. And the idea of what is a container, what is an original, is there such thing as an original, where does it start, where does it end, with this idea of mass production, trade and commerce. And yeah, they just all kind of feed and have a conversation with one another, and it's just a continuous conversation between all the works in this space.
Did you start with collecting the sort of cardboard packaging and then sort of really, unpacking it? Or was it the sort of etchings that drew you first, or was it, what was your kind of...
That's actually a really beautiful way of putting it. Like I'm collecting all this packaging, then I'm unpacking the idea and physically also unpacking the objects as well. I mean, all the work that's in this space, I guess, again, is found. I've been collecting for over 1.5 years, actually, since I ended my residency or my fellowship at SIF. And it's just been a continuation of collecting, but within these past 6 months, it's been actually unpacking, reworking, breaking them down, building them again, just continuous reiterations of themselves.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Well, again, so the Beyond Emerging Artists exhibitions are in Hall S, and I encourage you all to, the artists will be there after the conference and here for a few moments as well if you want to speak to them more about their wonderful commissions. Thank you for joining us on this panel. So I am now going to invite I'm now going to invite our curators for the artistic programs of the fair, Dr. Omar Khaleif, and of course Nicola Berriot and Andrea Petrini, to please join me up here and tell you more about the programs that are available for you to explore and discover. So I'm going to start with, is it Dr. O or Omar Khaleif that's with us on stage today?
Hello. You'll figure it out. But Dr. O is feeling particularly bloated this morning, so apologies if this slows down the presentation. Dr. O did ask if they could speak in a less conversational manner in the beginning, just because they did go on quite a journey to get here. Right. So you see the exhibition title there, who curated it, etc. Is that, can I be heard?
Yes, can everyone hear in the back?
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, during the height of the global pandemic, I thought it was time to tell my story. I wrote this book that you see here, mapping 3 decades of a life lived online, spanning from 1989 to the present. It was particularly important that I was invited to do so with Phaidon, who are the publishers of the best-selling book on art ever, The Story of Art by E.H. Gombrich, a quite horrible man, but 7 million plus physical copies and counting. And if Dr. O had their voice today, they would have sung 7+ million copies and counting, but that was the original plan. 7+ million copies and counting. Ooh! Oh, they can sing really well, they have a great voice. Out of order. Little did I realize that during that time, spending 16+ hours in front of a screen, that I would be devoured by my computer, animating and programming what they now called a metaverse platform. This, this, that there. That's a metaverse platform, apparently. Dr. O made that. That's a That's a rendering of a world. My life in the metaverse tells the story of me, Dr. O, one of the avatars of Dr. Omar Khalif, or Dr. Omar Khalif, as I find myself mastering the cable dance, skipping across grey cable and wire, binary code of zeros and ones. I decided at this point that I needed to learn to communicate in a different way, to begin curating from my desktop, to create a show as a metaverse, a show that sought to explain feeling as much as it's in its technical detail what the metaverse was, to give you a feeling of it, and what it could also be technically. So I went back to the start, to Namjoon Paik and his TV Buddha from 1974, the year that he coined the term electronic superhighway, giving life to a visual language of what would become the information superhighway, and to Andy Warhol and his obsessions with portraiture, the beginnings of our collective social media fame. Then I made contact with the outside world, with the realm of the living, summoning artists including Corey Archangel, Heather Phillipson and Simon Denny, Haroon Mirza and Trevor Paglen, Paul Heyer, Sophia Almeria, Cream Projects, Farhad Mushiri and Celia Hempton. I asked them all for new works that reflected and or embodied the metaverse. What's the metaverse? A complete singular world of transcendence. Is it through technology, or is it through its effects? Or is it indeed through its affects? The metaverse as we know it today has come to grow in tandem with the rise of what has been dubbed Web3, a proposition for a decentralized internet, which very quickly has been co-opted by various corporate spheres. But for those of you who'd like to know more, my t-shirt has the original Metaverse Manifesto published here, Web3 Manifesto for Bitcoin. The original email, the author, who was also an avatar. Today, you will be the first invited to enter my life in the metaverse, an exhibition of avatars and NFTs of propositions and dreams from past to present. We begin and end, depending on your route, with Dr. O's Pop Shop, the blockchain edition, a proposition for a concept store that's been minted onto the blockchain as an NFT, which is available for hire. It has been realized in collaboration with the UAE-based creative label Cran. You will find a card, which I forgot to bring on stage, sorry. The only thing that you can take physically from this shop, which allows you to drop Dr. O, that's me, a line about the terms and conditions of our smart contract. From there on in, the journey into the world begins, and the tools are yours to narrate your own story, to ask your own questions. You just might find your own avatar. Thank you.
Now we've dematerialized the press conference, I'm going to try and bring everyone back to the things that we can tangibly feel, and bring us back to the world that we can sentiently live in, and invite our co-curators for Cookbook, Nicola Burio and Andrea Petrini, to tell us a little more about what they have created and conceived for Abu Dhabi Art 2022. Cookbook is, of course, your co-creation, and this is the 4th iteration of it. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you first came together and what the initial idea was?
Now we are offline completely. No, let's break. The cookbook is actually an evolutive format, an evolutive exhibition format that actually happened 3 times so far from the beginning. Yeah. First time was in 2013, but it was a bit too early in a way, because at that time, what's really striking is that this merging between the universe of food and contemporary art didn't really happen yet, and that we see the evolution in 10 years, which is really amazing. And the second time was in 2019 in the south of France, in Montpellier. And the third edition, actually, I didn't even see it myself. I know, because it was just in Beijing, just 1 month before the pandemic. So bad luck. Okay, so we're just getting back here. And I'm very happy that we can propose this kind of very particular, exhibition format in Abu Dhabi. Let's say that it's this version has a specificity, which is that it's the first time it doesn't happen in a gallery, in an exhibition space, but in a restaurant. And this is very interesting too, because it obliges us to think differently. And of course, because of the duration, which is much shorter of the project, it led us to think differently the interactions between the chefs and the artists. Because this exhibition format that we actually proposing was actually the first one to gather in the same space artists and chefs, working really, each one on her own line, but confronting two ways of production, two different manners of reflecting the contemporary world. Because actually the relationship between art and food is not this kind of pictures you see on Instagram where you just people, photographing their dishes, What's interesting is that the chefs we're inviting, let's say, producing the same type of effects, but through taste, because that's taste that it's about, actually. Art is about sight, seeing, looking at things, but here, what's really one of our preoccupations is to show how this can be translated, and you can have the same level of understanding of today's steaks through taste. So that's why this edition in Abu Dhabi is half live and half, let's say, some samples of the exhibition. But we are very happy to do it in those surroundings. And the show this time has been also organized by my company Radicans, and I want to thank Korala Yabdukalikova, who might be here and who's the organizing force in this project. Yeah, it's exciting because it's an encounter which is always unpredictable in a way, and you will have both things to see and things to eat, but you have to think both ways. Whenever you eat and whenever you look at something, it's always about reflecting the world and try to understand it and try to make it something thinkable.
And of course, you've brought together a number of artists and chefs in alliance, we can say, to pick up on our Marinella, who are collaboratively creating cookbook at your invitation. And of course, Nicola, you focused on some of the visual artists that were brought in, and Andrea on some of the sort of culinary artists that came into engagement with them. I wonder whether, Nicola, you could perhaps tell us a little bit about some of the artists that you chose to participate for this edition.
Of course, here you can see Rita Alpha. Well, let's say this edition of Cookbook gathers in a way also and sums up a lot of different problematics linked to art and food. I would say here we have the relationship with the animal world, the Anthropocene, which is a common preoccupation for both artists and chefs. And then I don't know if we have Kai Ketidzi, for example, who's gonna prolongate the event of the 16th, in a different way from the 17th, and who's really, as a position really in between, the eatable and the visible. And then we have Isham Barada also, who's working on another common subject between artist and chef, which is the transformation of matter, because he's producing chemical reactions within closed spaces, which might be something like something that happens on a plate.
who of course came to the Alain Oasis in Alain and created an immersive sound installation. This is him visiting the Oasis a few months ago.
Because what was interesting here was that it was, as it's not a regular, exhibition space, we had to adapt and to create a totally different kind of exhibition than what it would have been, if it had.
He, was interested in the birds that were speaking to each other in the Oasis. And you can hear the birds in the background. So we've gone from a dematerialized conference to the beauty of the Alain Oasis through these amazing installations. And of course, you can also engage with this wonderful project through what you consume in your body and what you put into it. And that's where, Andrea, you've really been leading the way in bringing together some wonderful chefs from around the world. Could you tell us a little bit about the chefs that you've invited to participate?
Yes, with great pleasure. But first of all, I would like to say that I'm very happy that you used that expression, artist chefs. Because, people like to classify chefs like he is or she is a Michelin chef, she is a world 50 best, she is no one but she's interesting. But still they are considered as chefs. And of course, chefs, even for cookbook, they don't use paints or hammers to sculpture the stuff. But one of the probably the most important thing that we tried to do over the previous editions of a cookbook in Paris, Montpellier, in Beijing, is to put chefs and artists and show their work at the same time and the same level to showcase what the process of creation is, how similar they are. And it's very porous, it's very ambiguous. Honestly, sometimes you couldn't say, hey, that is an artist, so that one is a chef. And I really like your expression, artist chefs, because when we started thinking of this new form of cookbook made to measure for Abu Dhabi, the first thing was to gather a few chefs that would accept to dive into the unknown because of the short time we had to create the whole thing, because one is living in Istanbul, the other one in Singapore, we have another one in Dubai. We wanted to make sure that the alchemy would be perfect. What I've been doing, what I've been researching over the last months is to create something very inclusive, very collaborative, very participating, in a way which is half exhibitory and half like a live setting. And of course, there will be things to be tasted, to be eaten, to be appreciated for its own taste, but the process, the mental process of creation is still there. It's almost at the same level. So it's going to be something like a one shot for one night, like a performance, but at the same time there will be a permanent artwork that will stay much longer, which is like a raindrop of lucum, which is going to be like the legacy that will be left behind once the performance began. And the three guys from Istanbul, Singapore, and Dubai, I mean, why are they here? For many reasons. Because Ivan Brem from the restaurant Nuri is one of the most progressive thinking chefs in that part of Asia, which is subject, like many other countries, to the most recent diktats of food. Now we have to explain everything. There are some mandatory commitments that every chef has to endorse, like localism, where do you get your food, how to be natural, how to ferment stuff, how to be politically correct, and all that stuff. It's like if the pretext has become even more important than the product itself. And I think that is very nasty thing, very boring thing at least. And in a place like Istanbul and like Singapore, Ivan Brem is doing exactly the opposite. And honestly, we were talking a couple of years ago for a series of performances that I was doing with Gelinas, and one of his first references of Ivan Brem was to Nicolas' book, L'Esthétique Relationnelle. I mean, that also does not happen very often when you talk to chefs. Also, Maksut from Istanbul, Maksut Askar, I mean, his restaurant, Neo-Local, is one of the most advanced, if one can say so, in terms of research on the culinary tradition, the legacy, but always with a rather long-term kind of sight, like a long time ahead. Never accepting the easy effects that are so common these days. And as for Kasper Kurkurdal, our little code name, we call him our agent in Havana because he's Danish. He has been living and made a successful career in Antwerp in Belgium, then moved to Brussels and decided to work for a very classic and traditional restaurant. Then one day, a few years ago, decided to change life, and now he's in Dubai. And for us, he was like our little agent in Havana, the inside man who knows things better. He was the first one to come to Abu Dhabi and visit the place, the latter place where we are going to do the performance.
Let's hope he's not inventing his stories too.
And Kasper is a chef, but he's like from another planet. Just remember that in 2007, he was the first chef to plate dishes on vinyls, like prolonging the legacy of Christian Markley that he used to do that kind of stuff years ago. And so all this performance came together like a sort of mail art by WhatsApp on this WhatsApp group. And maybe one day we could publish all these documents, all this never-ending beep, beep. My wife almost cried for, I want to divorce, shut your telephone. Because of the time lag from Singapore and Istanbul, the telephone was ringing all the time. And
is it quite a challenge for three very strong creative chefs, artist chefs, to collaborate for something?
Oh, almost never met. That was one of the things. I mean, they knew of each other, but for example, Maksut and even never physically met. and the same with Casper. But they are on the same page, on the same level. They have a lot of things in common, a lot of humor, a lot of knowledge in terms of food, but also movies and philosophy. So I thought at the beginning that the alchemy could work. And little by little, the first ideas of, say, 3 months ago evolved in something probably more radical, less foodie oriented, a bit more aggressive in a certain way. You would expect the easy way would be, hey, let's do something local, let's get inspired by the legacy, by the food culture of this part of the region, when at the end the local part is probably reduced to spices and little herbs that we can forage. And it also became something step by step. There is this soup that they're going to create on Wednesday that needs the collaboration and the interaction of the guests. It started like a tribute to Miles Davis, then went through the soup, the Macbeth, the witch's soup, and now it's called Bewitch's Soup. So it's like a recording with different layers of instruments, and then assembling it together with the guests, with the audience participating like a live recording.
Which
and
really ties into, of course, Nicola's philosophy about relational aesthetics and that coming together of community. And Casper is going to be providing a special lunch for all of our journalists and media here today, isn't he?
You know how special? Is it going to be a lunch or a special lunch? How special is going to be that one?
It depends who's creating it. Since it's your agent, it might be quite fictive. And we invite everyone to discover it. It will be quite a journey. So, of course, with Casper and Sahar, I think you've invited to co-create with him the lunch today, because it's always about those conversations also with some of the artist chefs here. You've really brought together not just these different creative artist chefs, but also potentially all of our guests coming to the fair and sort of being together. Can you tell us perhaps some thoughts now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conference, that this is probably really the first fair where we're all coming in great numbers. We're not wearing masks, we're able to see each other, to hug each other, to say hello. And it really comes back to this idea of what food brings to the table, actually. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, you almost said it, because what the first thing that food brings is the table. And the table is the exact space, which is a social space. It's the first social space, in a way. Well, might have been the space just around the fire, actually, but now it's the table. And the table is a anthropological, item, in a way. And yes, so tables are very important in this exhibition. Also, they are actually invested by both artists and chefs, or artists chefs, or chefs artists. We don't know anymore. And that's the exact expression of conviviality. What is generated through the human interactions. And that's what we call art, whatever discipline it is coming from.
This is just the real me, the humble, not so... this is just Omar, okay?
Welcome.
Hi. So I didn't know that we were going to be together until about last night on this stage, which was about 2 in the morning. And I think that one of the core links that I just wanted to make between these two projects is the notion of the communal. So, and to kind of demystify this idea that there is that eating a meal at a table is somehow communal, but that convening in an altar space is isolating or fragmentary. And so the concept of this has been really, really kind of edifying. I mean, of course, we could say we could have a really cool panel discussion right now, but the idea that ultimately is happening in this exhibition is that so much is being said about the concept of how we will live in this fragmentary, insular, isolated way. And actually, I think that what the digital thickening that happened during the pandemic kind of elicited was that they are comorbid conditions of living, basically, that we need and desire both, and they make us hunger and hanker for both. And I'm not a digital, personally, I'm not a digital utopian or anything like that. I'm a centrist, but I'm very intrigued by what the internet has done to things like eating. And throughout the show, because I did think that you were going to do that you were going to let Dr. O speak and then let Omar Khalif speak for a second to jump into here. But I was going to say is that, just so that everyone knows, there'll be throughout the show, there'll be resources online that will be available to download. And one of them is a podcast that's already been recorded where a debate takes place between artists where they say, my body is the metaverse. The idea of eating, the sensorial aspect of being embodied is where the metaverse begins, this idea of this is the total universe, this complete work of art, and the sensorial aspect of that. And so this really is a kind of nice connection, I think, between these two very kind of what seemingly are different projects, but are actually...
We could rename them, actually. I propose that we rename them tables and screens, or plugs and forks. No?
Yeah, I like plugs and forks more, it's a bit more cool. Although what do I know about that? I'm just a humble human being.
Anything connecting.
Well, the third exhibition that I don't have a curator here to speak about, but is a very special project to us, is the Farida Lashai exhibition in the photography studio outside, and bringing together some of the penultimate works that the artist created on loan from private collections here in the UAE. And I'd like to invite journalists to discover that as well. It really is a very beautiful exhibition. And with that, I'm going to just lightly mention some of our commissioned artists. Marinella, of course, we mentioned earlier, Bodies in Participation, the large-scale luminare light installation that you walk through to enter the fair that brings us all together. Abdullah Saadi, again, one of our commissioned artists. You'll see he takes the Kipu language of South America, which is sort of knotted alphabets, and then creates his own version with the Arabic alphabet. Conrad Shawcross, you'll see his installation both in Aoun and here in Hall A, some smaller ones, really looking at the idea of light coming through quite mathematically, precisely lasered discs, and thinking about the context of light as it fell through the Louvre, but also, of course, the kind of light you get in the desert and in the oasis. He's created a beautiful installation or sculpture there. And Shilpa Gupta, I think we do actually have a few images, so Bodies in Alliance, of course. This is Abdullah's alphabet, his Arabic alphabet. Conrad Shawcross's installation where the discs rotate and the light comes through them differently. And Shilpa Gupta, who's actually loaned a few works and created a work to show at the Jahili fort in Aoun. And I'd also like to mention Farh Al-Qasimi, our visual campaign artist, who you will have seen on all the billboards and, of course, in the wall when you enter the fair. She's done an enormous installation for us that we invited to really form the identity of the fair. And a last point I'd like to also mention is an enormous thank you to our co-lead sponsors this year, Charles Zubair, who really are relaunching themselves or putting themselves forward for the first time here through their VIP lounge in the garden. It's a neo-Swiss luxury brand. And the Mohammed Hilal group, who are really supporting the amazing dinner that Andrea mentioned in passing for the Wednesday night, where the 3 chefs are coming into play and creating something special as well. And that we have community partners in the auditorium, a whole number of them who've done incredible projects that you should spend time and discover if you have time. as well, because those really are quite special. So with that, I'm going to conclude the conference. I realize we've held your attention for quite a while, so thank you for your patience, for listening, for joining us. I'd like to invite you to now explore the fair yourselves, and of course meet us all in Cookbook, in L'Arte, from 12:30 onwards to discover one of the artist chefs, or two, that Andrea's brought together in Nicolas' sort of reimagined space for the community to gather in L'Arte, where you'll discover some of the artists mentioned as well. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy. Thank you very much.